Greetings, everyone. This is Chris Frederick from the Stretch to Win Institute at stretchtowin.com, and I'm really excited to be with a very well-respected industry leader. A lot of you guys have been expecting this because I told you guys that I was going to interview some people in the field of self-myofascial release, rolling, pressing, whatever you want to call using tools on your body to get better. So yes, I'm here with Sue Hitzmann. And I'm going to just let her introduce herself, and then we'll get right into it. So welcome, Sue.
Thank you very much for having me on your show, Chris. This is great to have a nice segment like this. Great people you're interviewing.
Thank you. Well, my experience, I'm just going to tell you what my experience is with tools while I was way back in the 80s, basically, early 80s. Dancers, I was a professional dancer, as you know, and I didn't use too many tools myself. I like the footsie. The footsie's been around for a really long time. Basically, dancers in general, just in brief, in a nutshell, we use wood tools. And those wooden tools were created for massage therapists. There was like the knobby something.
Yeah.
And all these little things that you can, usually the massage therapists would either use it with their hand so they wouldn't break their thumbs trying to, work out a trigger point, a muscle knot, whatever you want to call it. So dancers just got these tools and started rolling on it and experimenting and playing with it. And I myself used the footsie, but of course they're hard, they're wood, they had their limitations, and they weren't exactly what we wanted or needed, but it's all we had and all we knew to use. In fact, we used the ballet bar on our feet too. We used to step on the bar and try to get rid of the knots underneath the feet and so on. So I'd kind of like to hear you about where it started, you think, this kind of tool business of rolling on tools, at least from your perspective, and really how you got into it.
Yeah, I'm going to be 45 this year, so I'm not exceptionally old. But as far as I've known, foam rollers have been around for decades and decades, and I was introduced to them myself when I was in my early 20s. I had injured my knee. And, I was a big athlete and stuff. And I was about 22. And the doctor said, oh, you have torn cartilage. We're going to remove the cartilage. And I said, actually, I think I'll keep it. And they were like, you'll be crippled if you keep it. I was like, well, that sounds like a threat. I'm now not listening to you and I'm going to keep it. So I went to a physical therapist's office and there was a guy using a white foam roller and working on his legs. And I was waiting for my session. And I said, what are you doing? And he says, oh, I'm rehabbing my knee. And I said, I have a knee injury. And he goes, come down here. I'll show you how to use this. And so we ironed ourselves back and forth all over my quads. And I was like, is it supposed to hurt that much? And he said, yeah, that's how you know it's working. The more it hurts, the more it's working. Mm-hmm. And I was like, okay. And so I rolled with him. I did my PT session. And the next morning, my legs hurt so bad from all the pressure, I couldn't feel my knee pain anymore. And I thought, is that the point of this? And so it didn't make any sense to me, so I stopped rolling. That was it. That was my introduction and my departure from those types of self-care tools, because to me, it's like if you're in pain, why would you cause more pain to get out of it? It just never made any sense. So, I think that they've been around, though, using manual tools. I think we've been doing it for centuries, really. I don't think it's anything new. I just think that our understanding of why we're doing it is starting to evolve, and I think that the methodologies are starting to grow. I think more and more practitioners are trying to create, self-care, not only tools, but methodologies so that people can do things for themselves. Because going to see a therapist to get yourself well, first of all, it takes a lot of time.
Right.
It costs a lot of money.
Yeah.
And to find a really great practitioner is actually, hard. It's
hard
tough to really find a quality practitioner. So, I think self-care is like something that we've all engaged in for, forever. I think all of us do, whether you stretch or whatever it is. We've been doing it for a long time.
Well, I'm going to jump in because my book, the Stretch to Win book, this is not a plug. It's been out there for a while now. We started writing it in 2003, so it's 12 years already. And it came out in 2006. It took us 3 years to write at that time. There is a chapter 4 it's called the Personal Flexibility Assessment. And I felt like I was pioneering the do-it-yourself assessment, because I didn't see that for just untrained people, the public, how to teach them how to assess themselves. Mm-hmm. I haven't seen that. It's just like, do this stretch, do this exercise, just do it. But
Yeah, like this stretches for this.
There was no before and after check.
Right.
Check in with your posture, check in with your movement, do a squat, see the change, the aberration, the detour that you take in a mirror, work on yourself, and now see if you changed it. You feel better, you look better, you did something positive. So that was my goal in that book. And a big part of that book was how to, again, I wrote this in 2003. It was about rolling on little fit balls.
Sure, love those.
Because the first course we took on rolling was
like Cheryl Solway
Cheryl
stuff?
Solway, right.
Love her.
Physiotherapist, yep.
Love her.
At some conference, and we thought, wow, we have to integrate this. We had already been doing our stretching stuff. It's like, this is going to make the stretching work even better. So that was our first exposure. We put her tools in the book and the footsie roller. But now I'm working on the second edition. I'm ready to move, upgrade to really what we believe in. And we believe in your stuff. I mean, my wife talks, about your stuff all the time to everyone. She's the queen bee instructor. I'm one of the lead instructors too, but we're always promoting. We have your links and everything in our resources, in our course manuals. So anyway, I'm so happy that you're here to tell us about, tell me about how you came to invent your product, and then we'll get into the science of it. But tell me, what was your inspiration to even get into? I mean, it sounds like your knee injury kind of maybe catalyzed something. I don't know. And you're bad.
Well, yeah, I think that's a common story for a lot of people. Everyone that I've talked to who actually has created, especially methodologies, it was something usually spawns the desire to, want to help yourself. And so that really, there was in my 20s, I was doing neuromuscular therapy with Leon Chaitow. He was my original teacher.
Wow.
And, in my 20s, I thought I was really smart. I had masters in physiology, and so I knew a lot about active isolated stretching. I had trained with Aaron Madison, Jim and Phil Wharton. And, I had a really nice arsenal of understanding muscular imbalances. And so when my knee hurt me, instead of getting the meniscus removed, I did mostly Chaitow's work and active isolated stretching. And, I've never looked back from that. My knee was fine. But it was when I was in my late 20s, I got plantar fasciitis, which is very common with a lot of athletes. And I have to tell you, when it happened, I really wasn't sure what it was. And I thought, oh, maybe I must have overstretched, or I've been working out too hard. So, I did what everybody does. I rested, I iced, I stretched. And, it was like 6 weeks went by, 8 weeks went by, 10 weeks, 3 months, 6 months. It just kept going. And it really got to the point where I had convinced myself I had stepped on a piece of glass. Wow. And I was ready to cut the bottom of my foot open. I was just like depressed. I was just stressed out. And the doctors were like, there's nothing physiologically wrong with you. I think you need to take an antidepressant. And I'm like, no, I'm depressed because I can't move. I'm not, wow. I don't understand what it was. So there was that initial impetus for me was really trying to understand what was going on in my body. But I was working on clients for, a decade before that. And the biggest thing that I was always trying to do was use Chaitow's work. And I was trying to develop at-home homework techniques so that my clients could try to reintegrate and repattern movement behavior and that kind of performance. And it kind of worked, but it's so refined, and a lot of my clients were coming in with pain, and they weren't really ready to do homework. So I just, there wasn't much I could give them. And it was really in 1998, I had a client who had chronic TMJ, and I had gotten her out of this debilitating pain where she'd get lockjaw. And she said, if you could just invent a way for me to do this to myself like you do with your magic hands, I could stay out of your office. And I thought, well, I don't know if I could actually simulate light touch therapeutic intervention with a tool.
Right.
So, but it did sound like an intriguing idea. And so in 1998, that was where I shifted from trying to give people homework that was neuromuscular and started giving them things that would simulate cranial sacral therapy and, neurological techniques, trying to quiet the stress reflex, trying to get the body's natural healing to boost back up, because I'm under the belief that our bodies are designed to heal. If you cut yourself, your body heals. You don't have to do much except put a Band-Aid on it.
Right.
The cells are going to repair. So I started developing what I was calling hands-off body work, because it wasn't exercises I was giving them. It was really therapeutic intervention. And at the time, there were no soft tools out on the market. So I started developing my first iteration of my tool. Was a piece of PVC piping wrapped in bubble wrap, wrapped in a yoga mat, wrapped in a yoga blanket, and duct taped together. And I started giving these tools to my clients with kind of light touch therapeutic techniques. I had done it on myself. I saw a change. I was working with one-on-one, and it was pretty incredible. I mean, people were sustaining the changes that I wanted them to keep, so that when they came back, I was able to progress them. And I think a lot of therapists get into that loop where you're just kind of working on the same thing over and over and over again.
Right.
And you never really fix the problem. You just sort of subside some of the symptoms temporarily.
Yeah.
And I got really tired of that. And so this was a very empowering way for me to try to get my clients out of my office. And what was, I think, the real turning point for me was that my clients were not only coming back sustaining changes, they were actually coming back better than just seeing me once a week or once every 2 weeks. They were actually progressing on their own by doing these things. The one thing that you had mentioned at the beginning was in your book, like that you were one of the ones to, say, hey, we've got to learn to assess ourselves. And that was always important to me. And for my methodology, that's one of the key components of melting, is to educate people on where this accumulated stress is living in their body, so that they're not thinking about where they have pain and not chasing the pain problems, but actually looking for the cause. And the one thing I know about people in pain is that they really need that assessment so that they know that they're doing something right. When I first gave this to my clients, they weren't really sure. Like, they would come back, some of them, I say, did you do the homework? And they said, I was afraid to do it wrong. I didn't want to do it. And I thought, well, okay, lie down. Let's do an assessment. Let's do it.
Yeah.
And then let's reassess. And do you feel the change? And if the answer was yes, I said, then you did it right. See, so, you can do this. And so part of it was giving them empowerment and hope. And there's a big psychology to pain and performance and feeling better. And so I incorporated that into the method. And now we've got, the book came out a couple of years ago, and it's made the New York Times bestsellers list. It's been translated into 8 languages. And my tools of choice currently, the 2 main products we have is a soft body roller and soft hand and foot treatment balls.
So what's the unique, how do you stand out as different from anything else that's out there in terms of tools or is it any different than anything out there in terms of your tools?
Well, in terms of the tools, what
it does, in terms of the tools, the technique and results.
I think everybody's got different philosophies, or, I can't really compare myself to a lot of other things, but what I can say is that my methodology is really first of all, it's for the general public. It's for people who have pain, who are looking to get out of it, or they have a career path or a fitness path, or their activity is one where they're looking to reduce their risk of injury. So it's more of like a preventative care and a elimination of pain type of methodology. To me, I'm not overly concerned about just improving someone's performance, because and I've worked with elite athletes, I've worked with some, I've worked with some big names, and really 80% of it is psychology more than it is, stretching or strength work or whatever. They train a really specific way. So my focus is really on pain prevention and elimination.
So how does your tool work at pain prevention? I mean, pain's a big topic, and there's a great deal of subjective aspects of pain. But how would you talk to a client about getting rid of pain using the melt?
Well, it's not even, eliminating. I mean, eliminating it, I guess they're both, it's part and parcel of the same thing. But my research and where my background went from personal training, group exercise, a master's in physiology to, again, thinking I knew so much about the human body. And then when I got myself into pain and found that none of these basic techniques worked to eliminate this pain, it was when I started doing light touch techniques that's what got me out of my pain issue. And it was also how I ever got into doing light touch therapy. I found my gift in light touch therapy that way. It really forced me into learning more about the human body. And where you and I both actually met was through this whole fascial community when I was trying to find an answer of what caused the plantar fasciitis? Like, what is it? I stumbled upon this emerging field of fascial research and science. I was very privileged to meet Gil Hadley, and I started doing dissections with him back in like 2003. I then met Tom Myers and Robert Schleip and Tom Finley to basically learn about this fascial system as a system. Gil was the first person who said to me, when I first saw that first layer of connective tissue, I said, what is it doing there? And he said, that's the system of the body that all vibration has to pass through, so your body creates intuition and understands movement. My head whipped around and I was like, did you just call connective tissue a system?
Yeah.
And he was like, I did. And I was like, well, it's not a system. And he said, why isn't it a system? I said, there's no active parts. I mean, it's just the passive packing material in your body that's holding things together. And he was like, oh, my dear darling child, no, that is not what that is. This system has active components. It's morphable. It's adaptable. It's in a constant state of change. And, that was sort of like, what are you talking about? But it forced me to literally veer out of that steadfast anatomical education that I had. Right. And it really was like opening up Pandora's box. I learned so much about the cells of our connective tissue. I'm very well versed in it now. I understand it more and more. And our own research study that we're doing for Melt now, we actually can understand what connective tissue is, how it's working, and some hypotheses are really being answered now because technology is allowing us to actually look at connective tissue as a system, not just as myofascia or the one layer, right. But the system as a stability system of the body. And my focus has been on understanding that stability system, defining it, educating people about it, and working with that system exclusively to then alter, like as the doorway or the vehicle into quieting the stress reflex, helping muscle performance, and all these things. So I think the thing that really separates me from most people is that my ultimate goal is to help the body's natural healing processes get back online and function more efficiently for those people who are struggling to get themselves out of a pain crisis. That's really where my bread and butter has been.
Perfect. Thanks for that explanation. Can you speak a little bit about the gentleness? Because there are techniques out there, mash and smash techniques would be the most extreme the other end of the spectrum, where people feel, and we talked a little bit about, how you hurt after you first rolled on things, and it was not a pleasant experience, and you felt worse on some level. So can you speak a little bit about your gentle approach? Because you talked about craniosacral as one example that inspired you to try to reproduce those effects that it's done and has great results in manual therapy. And I find it intriguing. So I'm just going to let you speak on the lightness, or however you want to put it, approach to,
okay, so
yeah.
Right. So let's go with the one that everybody knows is like self-myofascial release, or this whole, I keep hearing that word now, mash your fascia. I'm like, why are we mashing anything in our body? Like mashed potatoes don't your body. I mean, it doesn't even sound nice. Like, why would you do that to yourself? But, to me, I actually think there is a time and a place for heavy compression force. Okay. There really is. My whole point and the thought that I had was that before you beat your body up to eliminate a problem, wouldn't it be somewhat, I guess just a better starting place to understand the behavior of connective tissue, the reaction of fascia through compression, and then ease compression in to give the tissue more time to adapt to our own physical intervention, so that you're not oversensitizing the sensory nervous system, so that your body is reacting because the compression is so hard that your body's actually reacting in a negative way, which is, again, to pre-stress the tissue so that you don't damage anything inside. And that is something I don't think people really understand the behavior of fascia. Even people who have programs that talk about mashing and smashing your fascia, that even the concepts of shear force, understanding how to apply shear force to fascia to adapt it, is something we just need to be educated on. And I think that's why people gravitate toward MELT, is that I not only have a method, I've got science to explain the difference between these two approaches. So to me, I'm just giving tissue more time to adapt through a lighter, more gentle approach.
That makes total sense. I mean, to some degree, we're talking about trying to mimic a manual therapist, an experienced manual therapist with a range of tools, who's really good at what they do. They know how to get into the tissue. And it sounds like, correct me if I'm wrong, if you're trying to reproduce the manual therapy experience by doing it on yourself, the manual therapist would wait for the tissue, or as Tom Myers taught us, and when I did structural integration training, was wait for the tissue to invite you in. Mm-hmm. And of course, that's very subjective. Well, what does that mean? Can you test that? Is there a scientific experiment that would verify whatever? But really, from a manual therapy point of view, we don't dive in. We don't, start mashing or doing anything. We wait for the tissue. It's just like you would in acupuncture. From my knowledge of acupressure, and I'm speaking to acupuncturists and having received acupuncture, they don't just stick in the needle. There are plenty of times with the skin.
Right, they palpate. They palpate the tissue, they find, they tap. And then they're talking to you.
It's interesting because acupuncturists have said in many cases there's yin and yang reactions of the body. The body will pull. As soon as you enter the very tiny bit in the beginning, the body pulls the needle in.
Yes.
And in other cases, it will actually repel it. So
yes, where they'll actually push the body will actually push
bounce out.
I've had it happen in my body.
Yeah.
The needle won't stay in.
It's the same thing with your hand. From my experience as a manual therapist, if I can't go in, I'm not going to force it into the area. The body says, no, I don't want to go there. Take a detour. I will take a detour and go in another direction, a roundabout. There's direct techniques and there's indirect techniques, as Chaital writes about and a lot of people write about. And so we would take an indirect technique. So it sounds like that you're using sort of the manual therapy paradigm and your experience as a manual therapist to have people, let the
learn, educate them,
adapt to the pressure or whatever tool it is. Well, slowly.
Remember with a manual therapist, I've never just had somebody come to my office and say, my knee hurts. And I'm like, lie down. And I just put my elbow into their leg.
There are those who do that.
Why would I do that? And the thing is, in my literally 25 years of practice, it is the most common for me is when people have a problem and I spend 80% of my initial session just palpating the body, just seeing where does the tissue comply, where does it feel stiff, where does it feel like it's actually receiving compression, and where does it feel like it's resistant. I'm doing my evaluation, but oftentimes when they have a knee problem, the last place I even work on is the knee, because that to me is the victim. And, I always say if somebody's crying out for your help, you wouldn't walk up to them and punch them in the face. You would find the cause and the problem of their crying. And we don't do that to ourselves. If our hip hurts us, we decide we're going to take a ball and smash and mash our hip because we're going to fix it right. We're going to beat it up so that beat it into submission so it stops hurting me. But a therapist would never do that.
Right.
They don't just say, I'm going to beat you into submission until you stop complaining about this thing you're complaining about.
Mm-hmm.
There no quality therapist, I think, would go after a body with the intention of hurting them to get them out of pain. And the ones that do shouldn't be in the practice,
Agreed.
So, and we don't, but, as a regular person going to help themselves, there is this mindset that you have to go right after the areas of pain. And it is very often futile. You just work so hard to beat your body up and you really don't make any long-lasting change. Maybe you might feel a temporary desensitized sensation than what you felt before. But oftentimes it's because you've just diverted what your brain is doing. So, is it the central nervous system reacting to your work, or are you physiologically making a change? For me, I am a geek. I'm a science person. So once I started doing this for my clients, I really wanted to know more. I wanted to understand it more. And as I started to look into the research, there wasn't much research in early 2000s. It's really not since the first fascia congress, really, that I see everybody's a myofascial expert. Everybody's talking about myofascia. It's a key buzzword. It's entered fitness now. Everybody's talking about it. But do we really understand the cellular components of connective tissue? And then who's doing the research? And I'm here to say we just embarked. We started this project a year ago to do clinical research. And the reason people don't do it is it costs a lot of money. It takes a lot of time, and you have to deal with human bodies. That's why science likes to work on rats, because you can kill them and they don't go anywhere, and you can always go back and retest whatever you did because they're still in the same spot they were when you cracked their neck the first time. Human beings have to comply. They have to do things. They have to come back and be retested. And there's a significant drop off. And you also have inclusion and exclusion to have to deal with. So, the whole paradigm of this industry is growing. We are just at the surface of understanding what the fascial system is. But even the people who have been so steadfast on the heavy compression force, the ironing back and forth, the really smart ones are starting to come into my realm of melting. And I'm hearing the word hydration from everyone. Everybody's talking about the hydration issues and this and that. Well, I'm like, look, I've been talking about connective tissue dehydration since early 2000. And that's why the name is MELT, is we're rehydrating the tissue. We're bringing the fluid state back to the system so the system is more stable and functions more efficiently. We have a lot to learn about the human body, and we're just starting to understand the cells now. It's amazing what's going on.
It really is amazing, and it really is still in its infancy.
Yeah.
But from a practical point of view of what actually works, what you've seen work, because you've worked with so many, not only individual clients one-on-one, but with your students and your graduates and certified people that are numbering. There are tons of them out there now.
2,000. We've got 2,000 instructors worldwide. It's amazing.
And they're crazy fans of you and the method.
Yeah.
And we love them too. I want to know, if I'm your client or one of your graduates' clients, right? How would you teach me, without, in a nutshell, what is the method that you use to teach people how to assess themselves? For instance, your hip hurts, don't mash your hip out. So then what do I do instead? Like, how do I get rid of, if I can't mash my hip, what am I supposed to do to find out, how do I get rid of it, that pain in my hip?
Okay,
hold on, sorry. I just want to make sure I get this out before I forget. How would you teach me, I'm your client, to assess myself? And B, you mentioned that there are times where you could go deeper.
Yes.
I believe you said that, right. So how would you teach me to know, knowing nothing, I'm just a John Q. Public, I don't know anything about soft tissue or fascia. How would you teach me when to roll light and when to roll deep? Is it what's my guideline? That's it. Okay. Assess, and what are my guidelines for technique?
Okay, so first the assessment. What we do with MELT is, and this is just something that I learned over working on almost 10,000 people in a private practice over the past 15 years of my practice, was as I was working on my clients, there were 4 common imbalances that I ended up identifying over and over and over and over and over again. Every single person that came in with pain had these same imbalances in their body. And as I started to notice them, I would write them down. So I was getting smarter on my side. And so what was, again, in the late 90s, when my client said to me, if you could just invent a way for me to do this to myself, there was that growing need for me to educate my client to sense those common imbalances and see if they could feel them for themselves.
Right.
So I started working with this dialogue. I started explaining to people what does stuck stress feel like, and where does it love to live in the body? And can you identify it using body sense? And what I mean by that is without touching yourself, looking at your body, or moving around, could you just lie still and evaluate and actually sense these imbalances? And that was the huge turning point for me, was when I started doing that with every single client that came in. They were noticing those imbalances. And so I would write them down for them. And it was in 2003, I thought to myself, I think I could teach this in a group environment. I bet I could make it so that people never would have to come and see me.
Mm-hmm.
And to give it a shot, to use self-care before you spend your money going to a practitioner, could I help people in a group environment? So in 2004, I coined the word melt, and I started teaching people this in a group environment. And honestly, Chris, what is so profound is I could have 500 people lying on the floor in this rest assessment and describe to them, talk them through the assessment, and through each piece, like if I asked them to evaluate shoulder girdle instability, could they sense any of the common imbalances? And after I describe it, you see 90% of the group raise their hand. And I'm like, okay, so check mark number 1, you've got some accumulated stress in the shoulder girdle. Just remember that. How about the diaphragm? What does your back feel like? What does your pelvis feel like? And they were able to understand it for themselves. And that was when I really knew that I could educate the general public, people who didn't know their biceps from their biceps femoris. They didn't know a tendon from a ligament. They don't know their hamstrings from their deltoid. They don't know anything about anatomy. I could actually simplify science and anatomy to them in such a simple way that my own mother could understand what stuck stress felt like. Awesome. And when I had that, I knew that was, I knew I could help people. So then you're asking about the therapeutic intervention. So then we would bring them through what we call melt sequences. And each sequence that I've developed, is to really utilize a specific result. We're actually looking for specific changes directly to where we're working, but the profound thing are all the indirect changes that we make in other parts of the body without touching them, which also further educates the client. If you had low back pain, the last thing we would do is the low back release sequence, because you might find that you actually have stuck stress living in your upper body or your legs, causing your low back to feel pain. It's the low back is just the victim, but the problems are somewhere else. And what they get to learn to do is troubleshoot their own body so that they can actually assess and sustain the changes. And in our research paper, what was really cool was that we found changes in people in the short term, but over a 4-week period of time, there was a very distinctive, scientifically based change in the stiffness of their fascia. And that's something I can explain to you in a moment, but I also want to answer your other question about heavy compression. So when would you use heavy compression? First of all, some people like heavier pressure.
Yeah.
They like it. I know you've even said, some of my clients say, you got to go deeper, you got to go deeper. And I'm like, how do you know what I'm doing? That you would know if I need to go deeper. Actually, maybe I don't need to go deeper, but there's the psychology of feeling better. There's your subjective aspect, is that some people, if you only do light touch, there's such a skeptical mind that they feel it couldn't possibly help them or make a change. Yet I can put somebody through a 10-minute totally subtle sequence, lying on a roller, doing a couple of really simple things, come off the roller and feel huge changes in their body and change their mind over what really works to create the benefits that they want. Not just their thinking self. They've made themselves feel better psychologically because they feel like they've done something, but actually physiologically feel and sense the changes in their body. That's a big shift.
Is there any logic? Thank you for that explanation. Is there any logic? And that was very clear. And it's nice to see, you definitely have a logical methodology based on, tens of thousands of 10,000 or more actual clients.
Right. And 100,000 people have done that now worldwide, which is outrageous.
And you're getting the feedback, so that's magnified and exponentially increased. I was wondering, as you're speaking, it makes me also think, do you subscribe to, instructional integration? I did Tom Meyer's 500 hours of training, and it's originally based on Rolfing. So Ida Rolfing came up with the whole technique. which is osteopathic based and based on the first really recognition of connective tissue. Fascia, in my mind, was first recognized by the osteopaths, which was invented in America in the 19th century around the Civil War by Andrew Taylor Still. And so, basically I was taught in the structural integration world that if you peel away the superficial layer, finding and releasing restrictions in the superficial layer as a protocol, then the first 4 sessions, there's 10 sessions in a Rolfing, there's 12 sessions in kinesis myofascial integration. Mm-hmm. First 4 is really peeling away the superficial layer, and all of a sudden you see the posture change and this change and that change, and it's a revelation almost of what's now existing at the deeper layer. Right. There's that concept. So does that make any sense to maybe, and I'm just throwing this out there, would you think of going gentle to really work the magic that's lying inside the superficial tissue, the fascia layer? Yep. Because, you see skin scraping techniques. We have the ancient Chinese gua sha, which has been reproduced to some extent with Graston and A-stim and all these other techniques. And what are they doing? They're really affecting the superficial layer. You can't get in with a tool, with those surgical tools or with a seashell into your psoas. You can't go that. But they're having a lot of positive effects on people. Why? I think because they're affecting the superficial layer. But then that's where it ends. They can't go deeper. Now with rolling or using the tools that you have it sounds like you have the opportunity to not only balance out, for lack of a better term, your superficial layer through exploration, through your method. And then is there a time for a person to go deeper because their issues are deeper, like in the psoas? You can affect the psoas superficially, indirectly, and by way of reflex zones and other things in the tissue. But honestly, directly, if you want to directly go into something at a deeper layer, like the posterior tibialis, or anything that's at a very deep core level, do you address that? Or
to be honest with you, I have to tell you, it's just not true. Okay. I know that sounds awful because I feel like I'm going to create controversy. No, but let me try to educate who's going to listen to this and understand a couple of the new advances in the science and how we understand. Okay, first of all, when we talk about layers, I always want to say there is no spoon. There are no layers. Yes, in dissection, even in a fresh cadaver, I've done fresh cadavers, I've done preserved cadavers. It makes no difference. The only difference between a fresh cadaver and a preserved cadaver is the speed to which you've got to work, because the fresh cadaver decomposes and reeks, and the one that's preserved just smells like formaldehyde, but you can keep it out of the freezer for a day and a half.
I agree.
And you're good. Okay.
Been there, done that. I agree.
It is the only difference, but really what you're looking at is just a snapshot, like a selfie of a body in a stiff form. And so you have to separate what is in a living body and what we can look at to learn from a body that is no longer a life form, right? It's now kind of like an inanimate object, if you will. Once you're gone, the soul, the ideas, the psychology of the body is gone. The energy field of the body is gone. In my mind, I don't feel any of that energy left in that system. So in understanding fascia, yes, you can define layers, but in a living body, connective tissue is a 3-dimensional, fluid-based architectural matrix. And what we are understanding about collagen is not really a fibril, it's a microfibril. It is a fluid, liquid-lined fiber, if you will. That's what a fibril is. And it can move, morph, and adapt. And there are 3 components, just trying to be as simple as I can for everybody. There's 3 components that are really intriguing the researchers. It's called stiffness, elasticity, and tone. Okay, so stiffness. When people hear the word stiffness, they think, rigor mortis, right? And that's not it. Stiffness is fascia's ability to resist deformation. Right. That's what stiffness is. So the stiffer the fascia is, the less it's going to deform when you go to move. So yes, somebody who can't reach down and touch their toes has part and parcel a stiffness issue. It's that the tissue is not adapting quick enough for you to get the stretch in the muscles or in the sarcomeres of the muscle bellies, so that you move the way you want to move.
Mm-hmm.
The second word is elasticity, and elasticity is not about flexibility.
Right.
Elasticity defines the ability of fascia to morph and adapt, but then zoop, elasticity is how quick it returns. So for some people that we work with, they have connective tissue diseases like Ehlers-Danlos, where they're hyper flexible, not meaning that they're hyper elastic. What's happening is that the tissue is pulling, but it doesn't create elastic recoil. So they've lost the elastic recoil, meaning that it's more flaccid. But one way or other, whether you feel stiff as a board or you are hypermobile, you have an imbalance in the tone, meaning the readiness to respond of the fascia. Whether it's too stiff or not elastic, it's lost its elastic recoil. One way or other, the whole system is not as stable as it should be. And that's going to leave your joints either too close together or hypermobile.
Right.
It's going to make your muscles less reactive or responsive when you want to move. And that is why we get injured, is really connective tissue issue. So even the concepts, I heard you talking in your other interview with Cassidy about that old idea that you have an agonist and an antagonist. So when the bicep shortens, that the tricep must lengthen, and that's one thing that causes the muscle to shorten in the first place, is the other muscle lengthening. And the uniqueness that we're understanding is that connective tissue does not work linearly.
Right.
It actually, as the muscle is contracting, the connective tissue, because it's three-dimensional, is also pre-stressing muscles that can be quite far away from the area that's actually shortening to react and respond. And it's actually the fascia's communication to the antagonist that's allowing the length to occur in the muscles on the other side of the body. It's not a brain thing, it's a fascial thing, and it's actually happening without our conscious awareness. It's happening because, and that's what drives us crazy, is that it's doing something, and we can't quite explain exactly how those cells are so smart to pre-stress the tissue and orient the fiber so quickly so that when you do this, you don't rip the muscle on the other side, which of course does happen to our athletes because the connective tissue becomes cellularly dehydrated. And it is a cellular issue. We now know that the fluid level, the fluid abundance of fascia, is what keeps collagen bound. So collagen needs the water molecule to stay in its ideal elastic state.
For sure.
And so if it becomes cellularly dehydrated, that causes a lack of responsiveness from the tissue, whether you're hypermobile or stiff. It's a lack of tone or responsiveness in the whole system. So with melt, I don't care about layers. I'm looking to restore the whole fluid state of the connective tissue, because what most people don't realize is that the majority of our sensory nerve endings live in the fascia. So if you restore the fluid state of the fascia, the sensory nervous system kind of gets a little bit of a break. It gets new information. You create better body-mind communication. And so the brain can actually decode the messages it's getting from the body a little quicker. The body's reaction time improves. Muscles contract with more ease. And we just feel better. And this is science, my friends. This is not an idea. This is what we now understand about connective tissue. Now what we need are more clinicians doing research to show what types of pressure, what types of pull work, and why. And to your style of stretching, you have more of that active, isolated stretching. You're not just yanking on a muscle to an end range. You're using your own hands as a practitioner to learn what end range feels like. And the moment that you get there, you're letting it go for a moment, letting the brain override that myotatic reflex and going a little further and getting the brain and body into a more sympathetic kind of rhythm. And that's going to help an athlete, hands down, is the right way to stretch. And so you're educating people on ways to utilize the myotatic reflexes, the neurological components of movement, and improve them without having to hurt them or go to points of pain threshold or tolerating pain threshold. And something Leon Chaitow even says is most of the time the heavy compression or stretching methodologies, they're not actually making a lot of changes. Right. What it's doing is it's changing brain and tissue tolerance, meaning that the tissue can tolerate the pull better, or your mind can tolerate the pain better, but is it really improving performance or eliminating the problem? He's kind of like, yeah, no, I don't think so. It doesn't seem to be the same. But again, jury's still out. We need more research.
So when it comes to a person rolling, are they rolling in melt on? Like, do you talk about trigger points? Do you talk about knots? Do you talk about scar tissue? Or are you just talking about the fascia, basically?
Just talking about the fascia. Yeah, I don't really, I mean, you know, there's a lot of controversy about what is a trigger point, and, you know, do they really exist? And it's like, well, I don't care what you call it. Neurologically, when fascia becomes dehydrated, muscles have a tendency to either lock long or lock short. And when a muscle is in one of the two states, it simply means, again, it's lost its efficient tone. The tonality of it is poor. And so, you know, your timing of muscle is what makes us move and look smooth, so that we don't look like robots, or we don't look move. So what melt actually, you know, like if you, and to me, I mean, look, I love trigger point therapy. I love yoga tune-up. I love your stretching methodologies. If you melt and you do 10 minutes of melting, and then you do any of those things, heavy compression, your tissue, the fascia, is going to be a little more hydrated, and it's going to improve tissue compliance. And when that tissue is more compliant, when you go to stretch someone, you'll find for the practitioner it's easier for you to move them. They're going to move further, and they're going to gain further benefit. So melt is really kind of just a preface methodology that doesn't replace heavy compression force, stretching, massage, physical therapy. Actually, it doesn't replace a thing. It's just a very unique way to rehydrate connective tissue, to get the nervous system functioning more efficiently, so that your body performs with more ease and your brain kind of figures out what you're trying to do faster. And that's the methodology in a nutshell. And again, any other methodology could benefit from 10 minutes of doing that, and then do these things that are going to improve muscle contractions and you know, blood flow. Like, you know, trigger point is in, and I heard Cassidy reference this in your lecture with, or your session with him, was that it was about you know, restoring blood flow to muscle. And I always say, well, you could just jump up and down and restore blood flow to muscle. You know, so restoring blood flow to muscle is very short-lived. But again, if you hydrated the whole fascial system in a quick run, and then you did these very localized compression techniques, actually it would hurt you less, because your body would be more prepared for the compression that you'd be applying. It would hurt you less. And you would probably, if you did those smaller movements, you would actually get deeper, if you will, into the muscle bellies and restore even more blood flow, which is the actual purpose of those types of methodologies. But it doesn't replace anything. It really just is a very different mindset on why, how, and what you're doing to help body's nervous system function more efficiently.
Well, on that note, I think we'll draw this interview to a close, because I think that was a great nutshell.
Thank you.
Thanks for summarizing it for us, because it really does stand out as the melt method is different. And I just like the fact that people can help themselves without being, you know, aggressive and kind of nasty to their body. You know, it's just, let's go easy with your body and learn. You can't really learn if you're going to force and treat it violently, in a sense, or attack it, I should say. You know, we always say in our work, you have to romance the nervous system. You can't attack the nervous system.
Well, we also, you know, I mean, I think that there's three things I would say to anybody. You know, if you're in pain, there is so much more resource and understanding of what you can do to get out of it. So educate yourself on why you have pain, and don't be convinced that medicine is the only, or surgery is the only way out of it. You know, I think that research is necessary. And, you know, if anybody's interested in being part of our low back pain study,
Sure.
they can go to softfoamrollerstudy.com, softfoamrollerstudy.com, and apply to be a part of the study if they really want to see what is going on in their bodies and learn a little bit more. And, you know, if somebody wants to learn more about MELT, they can just go to meltmethod.com. The whole system is there. We've got DVDs. We do teacher trainings. I do teacher trainings worldwide.
Awesome.
You know, and I'm here for, you know, any help. We're on Facebook. If anybody has a question, they can go to info@meltmethod, and I'm happy to answer any questions they have. I just think life is too short, and I'm recently married, so I'm happy to live a very full life with another person, and pain should not be a part of the daily life. So, you know, care and stay well.
I love it. Help yourself with the MELT method.
Yes.
So anyway, it's been a real joy. It's always great speaking with you, but thank you for sharing your heartfelt, you know, feelings and opinions and science about this fascinating world, or as Robert Schleip says, fascinating world of fascia. It's great to be in that world. It is still a new world. Like you said, they weren't really using the word fascia as much as it is now until the first Fascial Research Congress in 2007 really started it.
Yeah.
John Barnes with myofascial release, MFR, kind of, you know, had that going for quite a long time before, but there was no science or anything. So it's
well,
a great.
Everybody should come to the Fascia Congress in September.
That's the other thing.
If you want to know about research, it is the best place. It's kind of like I'm going to be at the Idea World Conference next week, you know, and talking a lot about these sort of topics. But if you really want the science and you want to grasp the understanding of what is a fibroblast, what are glycoaminoglycans, how does hyaluron activate in the tissue, you know, what's the research that's happening today, they should go to the Fascia Congress. And if you cannot make it, Tom Finley and that whole contingency, they make videos. You can always watch the video later on. I highly, highly recommend that if people are going to talk about myofascia or any fascial element of their body, they need to understand the science and the research. You can't just say, you know, well, it works because it works. I just want to say, you know what? If you get a hug, you're going to feel better. So why not we just get this myofascial rolling crap and we'll just all get hugs all day long.
That's awesome.
Forget all of it. Forget everything I've said. Let's just all give a hug and a kiss to everybody. You'll feel good today.
I love it. Well, this is Chris Frederick with the Stretch Twin Institute at stretchtwin.com with Sue Hitzmann, creator, inventor, founder of the MELT method. It's been fantastic. I won't say goodbye. I'll say see you later, because
yes.
Never get tired of speaking with you, and we have a lot of stuff to cover and talk about in the future.
Yes,
so,
anytime.
Anyway, that's it for today, folks. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you again soon. Thank you, Sue. Bye-bye.